Good morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioner's Weekly Meeting for August 30th, 2023. Commissioner Plan, any preliminary matters? Are you ready to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Gellman.
Good morning. I agree and would approve the consent agenda.
As do I. Proceeding number 23AL-0375 TR, Mr. Gramlich, Home James Transportation.
Yes, good morning. I'm Gary Gramlich of the transportation staff. This is a filing by Home James Transportation, which is based in Grand County. The advice letter and tariff were submitted on July 18th. Initially, the effective date was to be August 21st, but it was postponed to September 1st to allow more time to provide information. Home James, under its certificate, may provide 5 different services in the area: charter and shuttle service between points in Grand County, and 2 DIA, and also even taxi service. But in speaking with the owner and manager of the company, a couple of these, the passengers don't request the service, and he's considering canceling 2 of these, which he can do, as doesn't have to cancel the entire certificate. He can just cancel sections of it. Home James may also operate as a luxury limousine carrier as issued by the PUC, and is also registered as an interstate passenger carrier with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. In this filing, Home James proposes to increase the fares for schedule and shuttle service between Grand County and DIA. The fares for both services are the same, whether it's scheduled or shuttle. As an example, the Winter Park one-way fare to or from DIA is currently $86. It's being increased to $88, and there is a lesser fare if you throw more passengers traveling together. It's going from 71 to 73. The other fares are similar. The annual report for 2022 showed that Home James had a total revenue of about $1.5 million in intrastate revenue and over $400,000 in interstate revenue. Total expenses were almost $2 million, which resulted in a net deficit of approximately $54,000. The manager of Home James, in support of the application, support of the tariff filing, states that he doesn't. He's estimating that the number of passengers will only increase by 1 or 2% in the next year, but expenses from hiring employees and drivers, fuel, insurance, maintenance, all those will all increase by about 5%, in which case both expenses and revenue will increase, but it will still result in a deficit, which he states a large part of that is the payout. He bought this company in 2018 and is still paying off the loan and the interest on the loan, so that he states this for some reason also causes the deficit. Stated it's difficult to predict the number of passengers that will be transported, maybe somewhat easier to predict the expenses. And as an interstate carrier, he does report some of that revenue also, so it's both intra and interstate. But as the fares are only being increased $2, I do have a recommendation, unless there's any questions or any need for additional information.
If you can make your recommendation, and we'll come back with questions, comments, discussion, or event.
Certainly, the recommendation would be to allow the tariff to become effective by operational law on the proposed date of September 1st, 2023.
Commissioner Plant.
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gellman.
I agree.
As do I. Thank you, Mr. Gramlich. Proceeding number 23V-0409EC, Rocky Mountain Care Ride. Mr. Riley.
Good morning, Commissioners. Nate Riley with Transportation Staff. On August 9th, 2023, the petitioner Rocky Mountain Care Ride filed a petition for waiver of Rule 6305, luxury limousine, as it pertains to a 2008 Nissan Murano with approximately 115,000 miles. On August 23rd, 2023, petitioner filed supplemental information related to the underlying petition. The waiver was requested from July 24th, 2023 through July 24th, 2025 for a period of 2 years. The petition was noticed on August 14th, 2023, and no interventions were filed opposing the waiver. In support, petitioner indicated that the underlying vehicle includes luxury features such as leather upholstery, heated front and rear seats, heated steering wheel, moonroof, 11-speaker Bose premium audio system, a driver's seat memory function, and motion-activated liftgate, as well as driver age, such as adaptive cruise control, driver alertness, and surround view cameras. Petitioner states that the underlying vehicle is ideal for transporting individuals in a clean, comfortable, and well-maintained vehicle. Petitioner submitted related photos showing the interior and exterior of the vehicle, as well as miscellaneous other features. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'm prepared to move on to the recommendation.
Commissioner Plant, what do you think? I struggle with these luxury limo things, and Mike Grant, the variants, just don't know how to parse out this, and situations where the demand seems to exceed the supply. I'd probably err on the side of granting these variances subject to our safety and inspection requirements, but want to see what you both think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, if it were a 10-speaker Bose system, no, but 11.
Commissioner Gilman, where are you at on this?
I'd be inclined to grant the waiver conditional on the vehicle passing inspection pursuant to Rule 6117B and keeping the records of that as is indicated in the rules. But I'm inclined to grant it.
Any guidance on the speaker system?
No, you don't want to damage your eardrums. So whatever it is, I'd keep it pretty moderate.
Mr. Riley, I think that can be an ABC order. Does that give you what you need, sir?
So if the commission's finding that the petitioner has shown good cause to waive the qualification provisions of Rule 6305A, I would just indicate that the commission decision should include, as you mentioned, that the waiver is conditional on the vehicle passing an inspection. That's pursuant to the requirements of Rule 6117B, and also that the decision and proof of inspection shall be maintained in the vehicle in accordance with Rule 6107B.
Absolutely, Commissioner Plant. What was there more, Mr. Riley?
Just one more thing. I just want to clarify the time period. It was requested through July 24th, 2025. I just wanted to make sure everybody was still okay with that requested date.
Commissioner Plant?
Yep, I support that.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yes.
As do I. And then again, that can be an ABC order consistent with your comments, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, commissioners.
Proceeding number 23M-0313 T. Mr. Enright, Ms. Ray, City of Aspen.
Good morning, commissioners. Gladys Ray of your telecom staff, joined by Mr. Jerry Enright. On June 13th, 2023, a petition was filed by the City of Aspen for the use of 311 abbreviated dialing code for access to non-emergency police and other governmental service information. Pursuant to Colorado Code Regulation 723-2-2742. The N11 numbers are designated by the Federal Communication Commission in docket number 92-105 and 97-51. The FCC has designated the 311 as a national abbreviated dialing code to be used for the purpose of responding to calls seeking non-emergency police and other governmental service information. The City of Aspen would like to offer the use of abbreviated dialing code number 311 to its citizens and visitors. Now, the intended use of 311 is for non-emergency governmental use, including but not limited to receiving complaints and responding to requests for information and services, and for departments or non-emergency functions. Departments like environmental health, clerk's office, Roaring Fork Transportation Authority, transportation in general, parks and recreation, community development, permitting, zoning, police, utilities, arts facilities, special events, and communication facilities. The hours proposed of operation would be Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And after hours calls would go to general voicemail, providing callers with other options. The City of Aspen has started working with the local incumbent provider CenturyLink, as well as Comcast and other wireless providers to implement the 311 dialing. CenturyLink has advised that the City of Aspen city limits fall within the delineated borders of the Aspen Wire Center. And the implementation shouldn't be an issue. And I can pause for questions, or I can move forward to the recommendation.
If you could give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. Staff recommends that the commission grant the petition a draft decision that allows carriers to submit information concerning their implementation needs to set up the 311 used by its customers has been drafted. If providers make no subsequent filings by September 29th, a 311 implementation date of October 31st, 2023 is recommended and included in the decision.
Commissioner Plant,
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision granting the petition, I think with an implementation date of October 31st.
Correct.
So thank you, Ms. Ray.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 23M-0379T. Mr. Enright, Ms. Ray, the high cost support mechanism.
Yes, morning, commissioners. Continuing with Gladys Ray. This item has to do with the high cost support mechanism, and specifically an update to the commissioners on the surcharge collections that have been made for the first 6 months of 2023. This surcharge is the 2.6% that's added on to end users' telecommunications revenues that you see on your bills. For the first 6 months of 2023, actually back in 2022, staff had estimated that for 2023, the total amount of surcharge collections for the year 2023 would be $19 million. In actuality, for the first 2 quarters of 2023, collections were actually a little bit higher than that amount, which would have been $4,750,000 per quarter. In reality, the collections were about 912,000 greater than what was anticipated, which is a good thing because for the last 5 years, surcharge collections have been dropping. So whether this has been due to the economy or just people purchasing more services, that's a good thing. So to the extent that surcharges have actually collected, there have been greater collections of these surcharges. There is a provision in the statute that goes back to Senate Bill 18002 that if surcharges are anticipated to be collected in excess of $25 million in 2024, the commission has an opportunity to reduce that 2.6% surcharge. At the level of these surcharges being collected, staff does not recommend that the 2.6% surcharge be dropped at this point. With the collections being made for the first 6 months, we anticipate that total annual surcharges will be in the area of $20 to $21 million. So staff has prepared a memo to the commissioners that it proposes to include in this proceeding, 23M-0379T. This is a proceeding where the telecommunications providers actually report their 6 months revenues. So for your consideration is this memo to be included in this proceeding. So unless you have any questions or comments, that is our recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, where do the surcharges go, and how does this compare to the expenses?
Sure. Yeah, the surcharges back in Senate Bill 18002, Commissioner, the legislature actually directed specifically where these surcharges go. Currently, there's 12 rural providers, 10 rural local exchange carriers, and 2 wireless carriers that receive a fixed amount of these surcharges, with the remaining going to the broadband fund, which is over at the Office of Information Technology in the broadband office. So they're currently receiving the bulk amount of these funds. Starting this year, CenturyLink or Lumen dropped off being able to receive any funds. They received diminishing funds over the last 5 years. Now they receive 0 funds while they still contribute, but the bulk of these funds go over to the broadband fund for infrastructure investment in broadband.
Great. Well, I know that that's a focus, so I can't imagine that the additional funds would be welcomed by the broadband office.
Yes.
I would support that.
Commissioner Gilman,
Thanks, Mr. Enright. I agree with your recommendation.
as do I. Anything else on this one, Mr. Enright?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. Let's take up proceeding 19A-0209, Prospect Mountain Water Company, Ms. Dundas, and then we'll take up the 2 electric res compliance cases together. Ms. Dundas.
Thank you, Chair. Prospect Mountain was a water utility that provided water service to approximately 130 customers in the Estes Park area. In 2015, Prospect Mountain filed a voluntary petition for relief under Chapter 7 of the Bankruptcy Code. And since then, providing a little background, since I don't believe any of us were with the commission at this time, but a trustee had overseen the bankruptcy proceeding in bankruptcy court and occasionally has had to make filings at the PUC to wrap up the bankruptcy. For Prospect Mountain, the commission established a capital improvement fund, or a CIF, by decision C12-1198 back in 2012. And since its creation, the commission has had to approve uses and expenditures from the fund. Historically, the commission has approved numerous disbursements from the fund in previous proceedings. And in 2019, the commission granted, within this proceeding, the trustee's application to transfer the assets and relinquish Prospect Mountain CPCN. This decision also transferred all the property aspects, easement rights, and accounts receivable held by Prospect Mountain to Estes Park. Through an operating agreement entered into back in 2019 through Prospect Mountain and Estes Park has been responsible for the day-to-day operation of the former Prospect Mountain customers and the water distribution system owned previously by Prospect Mountain. So in Commission Decision C19-0440, which approved the transfer of assets to Estes Park, that included all funds and accounts receivable. So the bankruptcy proceeding concluded a few months ago, and the trustee requested the commission disperse the remainder of the fund to Estes Park. And while the commission's previous decisions may have intended to include the transfer of the SIF funds, it does not explicitly reference the SIF funds. So out of an abundance of caution, we have put this on the agenda today to affirm that the commissioners approve the request from the trustee and that the commission staff may disperse the remaining funds of the SIF to Estes Park. So I'll pause here and a vote for that, or I can provide a recommendation.
If you'd provide a recommendation, but it sounds like we'll defer to the trustee.
Yeah, my recommendation is as you say, that it feels like there's little controversy in this request, and this was a longstanding plan to eventually transfer these funds to Estes Park. They were originally collected by Prospect Mountain customers, and those customers are now served by Estes Park. So it makes sense for the money to go there. So I recommend you issue a decision approving the disbursement, and then the PUC director can sign the disbursement form received by the trustee, and Estes Park can eventually receive the remainder of the funds, which is approximately $159,000. I'm sorry, $195,000.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gutman.
I agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision approving the transfer of funds to Estes Park. So thank you. Proceeding number 16A-0436E, Black Hills Res Compliance Plan, and welcome to the public forum, and I'm going to welcome you by mispronouncing your name. Why don't you just introduce yourself, so maybe I have a prayer getting it right next time.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Jessie Shula with your commission advisory staff. This proceeding is Black Hill Energy's motion for approval of its 2022 Res Compliance Report. The decision before you today is to either grant or deny the company's motion for approval of its 2022 RES compliance report filed on June 1st, 2023, pursuant to Rule 3662 of the Renewable Energy Standard Rules. The Commission in this decision must determine whether Black Hills is compliant with the statutory requirements for the 2022 RES compliance year. To provide relevant history on this proceeding, Black Hills' original RES compliance plan, which covered the years 2018 through 2021, was approved by the Commission on January 17th, 2017, in decision number R1700391 in proceeding 16A0436E, this proceeding. In 2021, Black Hills filed a petition for approval of waivers and variances to establish the filings and dates of its next electric resource plan and renewable energy standard plan. Included in that petition was a proposal to continue its existing RES compliance plan, originally set to terminate in the end of 2021 through the 2022 compliance year. The Commission granted this extension to include the year 2022 in decision R210766 in proceeding number 21V0342E, which is why we are reviewing Black Hills 2022 compliance in this proceeding. Procedurally, Rule 3663 states that Black Hills must submit an annual compliance report in which it must explain whether it complied with its RES requirement, including whether it satisfied the requirements for distributed generation during its most recently completed year. Black Hills filed a timely report on June 1st. Upon receipt of this report, the Commission will provide notice to interested persons that they have 30 days to provide comment to the Commission on the content of Black Hills' report. On June 2nd, the Commission issued this notice and no comments were filed. Then the Commission staff have 60 days from Black Hills filing to review the report and make a recommendation to the Commission as to whether no action should be taken because Black Hills has met the RES and requirements for renewable distributed generation and has correctly calculated the ongoing annual net incremental costs. That's option 1. Option 2, changes are needed to the RES compliance report, or C, a hearing is necessary. Staff made a timely recommendation to the Commission on August 1st, 2023. And then finally, where we are today, upon review of Black Hills' annual RES compliance report, Commission staff recommendation, and all comments filed, the Commission will issue an order stating whether Black Hills complied with the RES during the most recently completed compliance year, whether they satisfied the requirements for renewable distributed generation during the most recently completed compliance year, whether they correctly calculated the ongoing annual net incremental costs for new eligible energy resources, and whether a hearing is necessary. So for this compliance year, Black Hills was required to generate 30% of its retail electric sales from eligible renewable energy resources. 3% of its electric sales must be generated from renewable distributed generation resources, and at least 1/2 of that must come from retail distributed generation resources. So for this compliance year, Black Hills overall retail sales were 1,898,679 megawatt hours. Therefore, their 30% RES requirement is 569,604 megawatt hours. Their 3% renewable distributed generation requirement was 56,960 megawatt hours, and the 1.5% retail distributed generation was 28,480 megawatt hours. I can pause now for questions or proceed to recommendation.
If you could give us a recommendation, and then we'll come back with comments, questions, discussion, or a vote.
Great, thank you. I recommend that the Commission find that Black Hills was in compliance with the RES for 2022, including its distributed generation requirements. Therefore, I recommend the Commission approves Black Hills' motion for approval of its 2022 RES compliant report and does not proceed to a hearing. I further recommend that the Commission issue an order stating that 1, Black Hills complied with the RES during this 2022 compliance year. 2, they satisfied the requirements for renewable distributed generation, including retail distributed generation. 3, they correctly calculated the ongoing net incremental costs for new eligible energy resources. 4, a hearing is not necessary. 5, Black Hills is not carrying RECs forward. And 6, Black Hills is taking steps to comply with SB 21261 and SB 21272, which are additional statutory requirements in the RES, and that they will be complying in the 2023 through 2026 RES compliance plan.
Commissioner Plant.
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gellman.
I agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision granting the motion consistent with your recommendation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, commissioners.
Proceeding number 19A-0369E, Public Service Company Res Compliance. Ms. Shula.
Great, thank you. This proceeding is Public Services 2022 Res Compliance Report. Similarly, the decision before you today is to determine whether public service was in compliance with the res, including its distribution generation requirements for this 2022 compliance year. For relevant history in this proceeding, the company filed its 2020 through 2021 res plan on June 28th, 2019 in this proceeding. The commission approved the company's plan in decision number C200289 on April 28th, 2020. Then on December 10th, 2021, the company filed an unopposed motion to extend its 2020 through 2021 res plan programs in this proceeding until a final order from the commission was issued in the company's 2022 through 2025 res plan in proceeding 21A-0625EG. In decision 21-0838, the commission granted the company's request to extend its 2020 through 2021 res plan programs through 2022, thereby situating this 2022 res compliance report in this proceeding, not in proceeding 21A-0625EG. Notably, the 2020 to 2021 programs continued through nearly all of 2022 as the company received a final commission decision for its 2022 through 2025 res plans in proceeding 21A-0625EG in November of 2022. Notably, the company is addressing an ongoing error in its 2020 Solar Rewards Community SRC standard offer price. In this proceeding, in decisions C23-0083 and C23-0020 made in this proceeding, the commission requested that the company submit a narrative response responding to a claim made by the Colorado Solar and Storage Association that the company's community solar garden standard offer contracts were awarded to developers with REC pricing that was more than double the authorized amount, which could have resulted in $12.4 million in excess costs to customers. The commission also ordered that if the claim was accurate, the company should explain in its narrative, A, why the contracts were not subsequently modified, and B, how the costs will be allocated to customers. In its narrative issued in June, the company concluded that a mistake was made by program staff while calculating the standard offer price, resulting in a standard offer price more than double the correct price and resulting in a potential $12.1 million in costs to customers over the next 20 years. The company provided both narratives of how it intends to mitigate this error happening again in the future and how it intends to remedy the current error. To mitigate similar errors in the future, the company is planning to take 4 steps. First, they are implementing new training procedures for renewable energy programming team members involved in managing these programs and adding additional internal reviewers to SRC awards for both the RFP and standard offer portions of the program. Second, they're making administrative changes such as updating internal documentation to provide more clarity for reviewers and requiring more detailed documentation and tracking so that such errors don't get missed. Third, they are retaining an independent third-party evaluator to audit their 2022 through 25 SRC solicitation and standard offer award processes to identify potential process improvements. And then fourth, they are approving a check-in process, which will provide additional opportunities to review all planned RFP capacity awards prior to executing any SRC producer agreements. In terms of how the company is looking to remedy these cost impacts to customers, first, it's important to note that the company stated that it ruled out the potential to modify contracts with the developers as the contracts had been executed, the projects had been pursuing development stages for several months, and the company did not believe developers would voluntarily modify the contracts to receive lower REC payments. This unilateral assumption likely occurred around November 2021 when the issue was discovered by the company. Following the Commission's 2023 decisions referenced above on this error, the company reached out to individual representatives for each of the 3 developers to determine if they would voluntarily agree to reduce the REC prices for the affected projects to remedy the standard offer error. Following those discussions, the company determined that there was no viable path to modify the contract prices given the length of time that had elapsed in the company's or the developer's reliance on the contract pricing to secure financing and begin development. To note, these discussions likely came between April and June 2023, about 18 months after the company first made the unilateral assumption that the developers would not modify their contracts. Without the option of modifying contract prices, the company would like to pursue voluntarily reducing the amount of company-owned community solar garden capacity approved in the 2022 through 2025 renewable energy plan at a dollar value commensurate with the cost impact of the 2021 standard offer error to fully offset the impact to the RESA and the cost impacts to customers. However, the company will not be able to fully determine the scope of this remedy until after the 2023 SRC RFP has occurred, and it has ascertained the appropriate level of capacity that would offset this $12.1 million error, capacity that will not be available for customers of these programs. The company proposes to update the commission on the status of the conferral process and bring forward such a proposal as part of a filing in the 2022 through 2025 proceeding 21A-0625EG after the 2023 SRC request has concluded. Compliance for the So moving on to compliance requirements, the compliance requirements for public service are the same as for Black Hills, which means that in 2022, in accordance with the renewable energy standard, they must generate 30% of their retail electric sales from renewable energy, 3% from distributed generation, and 1/2 of that from retail DG. The retail sales for 2022 was 28,790,273 megawatt hours. Therefore, the 30% res is 8,637,082 megawatt hours, excuse me. The 3% renewable distributed generation was 863,708 megawatt hours, and the 1.5 retail DG was 431,854 megawatt hours. I can pause for questions or proceed to my recommendation.
Why don't you give your recommendation and then we'll come back and see where we want to go. There's a lot in that presentation. So why don't you give your recommendation and we'll come back and chat.
Great. I recommend the commission find that the company was in compliance with the res, including its distributed generation requirements for the 2022 compliance year. I recommend that the commission approves the compliance report and does not proceed to a hearing. I recommend that the commission issue an order stating that the company complied with the res during this 2022 compliance year, including satisfying the requirements for renewable and distributed generation. The company has correctly calculated the ongoing net incremental costs, and a hearing is not necessary. The company can carry forward a total of 27,895,890 RECs, and the company and the commission will continue to determine compliance with SB 21-262 and 272 in future res compliance plans. Thank you.
Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go?
Well, in general, I support the recommendation. I am a little disturbed by this, the solar garden mistakes that were made and the ways in which we're proposing to remedy those. And I want to ensure that, not only are consumers made whole with the 12 million, but that the cost of that money is returned to the consumers as well, just like we do with the utilities when we apply a cost of money adjuster to that. But I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place for that, or if it's in a different proceeding. And then I did, Mr. Chairman, after we're done with this, I would like to get your thoughts and Commissioner Gilman's thoughts on another proposal that's related.
Yeah, similar, Ms. Chula. I have no issue with the compliance report and approving that, and so to that degree, agree with your recommendation. I also agree with Commissioner Plant. I'm not over this issue that we've seen with community solar gardens, and understandably, it was the first time, but there's a significant cost here, and I think we need to understand what the path forward is. It doesn't seem entirely related to the compliance filing, which, is primarily kind of based on these older statutes in terms of tracking renewable energy. But I think we need to understand what the path forward looks like to really explore all of the options as far as what the remedies could be here, and what the appropriate actions are, especially to address this from an affordability standpoint for customers, because it's coming at a tough time, and and the company's own filing is essentially a result of a mistake by the company. So I don't know if we settle this today, but I think we really need to have some follow-up on this issue to understand what the proper venue is and how this happens. I know there was an indication that the company would be filing something about this one proposed remedy that they suggested, but I don't think it's time bound, and I also don't see it as settled as that being the only remedy we want to look at. So I think we need to think a little broader about what's the right procedural apparatus to kind of move this to, so we can really have that evaluation of what the options are here, and see it on a timeline where we understand when this will come to some resolution.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Gilman. Ms. Gillette, do you know, and you may not, we may need to bring this back later or advise us separately, but do you know where the company recovers that $12 million in costs, and when that goes into rates? Is that through the RISA, or and is that has that somehow been deemed prudent and in the RISA now, or is that a separate prudency determination for the future? Do you know? And you're welcome to phone a friend if you need to.
Thank you, Commissioner. So yes, the 12.1 million would be taken from the RISA. However, the company is proposing to offset that full cost to customers by reducing the amount of company-owned community solar garden capacity approved in its 2022 through 2025 plan, which would then mean there was no impact from the RISA or to the RISA, but less of the programs allotted. In terms of another prudency review, I might refer to Ms. Crandall as to whether that is the process.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. I think, for purposes of the discussion today, we don't have the full proposal on the table. And so I think it would be helpful to see how that's laid out a little bit more when the motion comes in and proceeding 21A-0625 EG. But for purposes of today, this is a check on the compliance related to the RECs, and not as much the RISA revenues. But Ms. Shula is correct that it's looking at funding that would be coming out of the RISA accounts and collected through those revenues.
Appreciate it. Commissioner Plant, it sounded like you had some comments you'd like to share on community solar gardens.
Not really on community solar gardens, but more on the res in general. I think that, in my view, the benefit of the res is pretty limited at this point, if at all. I don't think we get that much information out of it. The Renewable Energy Standard was created in 2004, and then modified in 2007, and then modified in 2010 with a compliance date of 2020. And at that point, we really shifted from a renewable standard to an emissions standard. But the renewable standard is, still in statute. So we go through the process of, doing these compliance reports and things. I think at this point, we're dealing with different challenges and different issues than we were in 2004, when renewables were more expensive and we didn't count externalities, and we needed to establish as a state a certain amount of renewable energy that was going to go into our generation mix. I think at this point we're in a different world, both with the costs of renewables, but also we have an emissions standard that is largely driven by renewables. I think the distributed component of it is perhaps still useful, but because all the RECs get carried forward, we aren't really getting any information about how much distributed generation is actually on the system, because it's all sort of an accounting thing with RECs. And I recognize that the statute remains in place, But I'm wondering if the commission would want to initiate a conversation at some point. I'm not, saying that this is certainly anything that's like sort of pressing, but at some point with the legislature, with stakeholders, with the company, to talk about maybe what a transition away from the res would be, or if there's some sort of a change in the res that policymakers want to make that would actually be more appropriate and more applicable to today's situation, and also today's challenges. I mean, we have completely different challenges today that certainly it would merit discussion, and maybe there are policy solutions that could be more appropriately put forward, and we might want to be instigators of that conversation. Either maybe it's through an M docket, maybe it's through just a hearing with the legislature, maybe it's through a legislative interim committee. Maybe I don't know exactly what the process is, but the res compliance, I don't think is really serving that much of a purpose at this point, and it would be good to communicate that with to the legislature and see what maybe comes next.
Well, I will turn it over to Commissioner Gilman before I make the same points, maybe even more strongly with deeper frustration. But Commissioner Gilman, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think we need to figure out what that follow-up looks like. I mean, without a doubt, there are aspects of the res, many aspects of the res that are probably outlived their usefulness in terms of applicability for where we're going from an emissions and technology standpoint. But then there are potentially, other technologies and other places to look to. So I think we need to, that should be supported in the way we supported, wind and solar kind of in the early days when they were not as cost effective. And so I think we need to figure out what that process looks like internally. Are we talking about kind of a pre-rule making into a rulemaking or something like that to kind of revamp this in the future? I don't think we're ready to make that decision today, but I think we need to think about, what kind of was the purpose of the entire apparatus we have, what has to remain statutorily unless the older statutes are changed, and then, what should it be when it grows up? What is the best use of this? And, and you bring up some of the issues. One issue that's probably slightly more concerning to me is that the accounting for the RESA, once renewables became cheaper, has gotten torturous. Like it's really difficult, and I don't think it benefits anyone to have kind of that level of opaqueness with the costs and how they're flowing. And so that's troubled me as well in terms of just the way this all played out, which in the end is a huge success story, to be honest with you. Like that, the punchline here is it worked. There was an apparatus in Colorado to ensure that wind and solar could be successful, and look how successful they got. And so we are actually seeing costs that are lower, but I don't want to say it breaks the apparatus, but it makes it more complicated. It makes it more opaque to kind of understand, okay, what do we need to do now as we move into the next phase of where this all got, with what new technologies need support and what we're seeing in pricing of the other technologies. So I think that would be a really useful exercise to have here. And I think we'll need to talk on timing. I mean, my guess would be it's like a pre-rulemaking M docket where we really look to get some of that information from stakeholders in terms of like what's still useful, what's still necessary, and what are the other things we should be focusing on to ensure this is as useful as possible and serving its purpose to continue moving Colorado forward in the clean energy transition. So I certainly support the general sentiments, and I think we're going to have to work with advisors and council to figure out what do the next steps look like. But this is certainly an issue worthy of attention.
Well, I just echo what you both said. And in the what was it, the 2022-2025 res plan for a public service company, I mean, we had something like 600 megawatts. Yeah, probably more like 700 or 800 megawatts proposed in front of us with a, over $1 billion commitment. all of it, ultimately running through the RISA with potentially, as Commissioner Gilman said, opaque, overly complex justification in ways that, don't promote accountability. And for me, this $12 million mistake that Ms. Chula referenced it's just a lack of transparency. It may be a symptom of a larger lack of transparency and accountability. And, we just keep doing standalone solar without pairing it with storage when the ERP says that's what we need. So, ultimately, I think we need to get the larger decisions over to the ERP and stop trying to do it in the context of the RISA. And as Commissioner Gilman said, more experimental, newer technologies, we can keep doing this way, maybe, but not hundreds of megawatts with billions of dollars, through a process that's clearly not designed for where we're at today. So I don't know we're going to do anything with this decision here, but Commissioner Plan, I guess, we'll bring this back either in the 2022-2025 res compliance. I think it's 0625, maybe EG. But Commissioner Plan, any comments on what you heard from Commissioner Gilman and myself?
No, I mean, I agree with both of you, and I think the reality is that the statute is the statute, and so we have these requirements for compliance, and at this, I think it would behoove us to sort of really engage the legislature in this conversation, so that the decisions that are being made in the legislature are sort of driven by what we're seeing in the actual application, and what our true challenges are today, and where we kind of see the electric system going, so that we can send the puck to where people are going to be. Right now it's way behind us.
Well, I'm not sure we need the legislature. I think we're way over complied with the statute, and most of what's going on is almost entirely at our discretion. So
but it's all kind of, we do have to do these compliance reports, and the company has to do them, and we have to have these discussions about whether or not they comply, which they comply through just accounting, like sort of moving the recs here and there, and it doesn't tell us anything. It seems to me it's not really serving a useful purpose at all. And so I just wonder if we want to talk about where we go next, as opposed to, continuing to comply with a 2004, statute.
Just realize the 2004 statute is now being used to justify, $1 billion worth of investment.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that our emissions, regime at this point is really driving our resource decisions, as opposed to, the renewable energy standard. It's just, it just is still there, and maybe we want to talk to the legislature about replacing it.
Commissioner Gilman, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would want to add that this isn't a lack of support for like distributed solar or distributed resources or anything.
Oh, no.
Like that. I don't want this discussion to come off as that. It's more like, how should this apparatus be designed? What should be the reporting? What should be the goals? And what rules should kind of buttress what happens here to bring it to current? Nothing, I think the accounting is really challenging. Some of the reporting is probably not exactly relevant today. But like I said before, this is an awesome success story. So I don't want this to be taken out of context to say, like, we want to undercut everything the res supports. Like that's not true at all. So I just wanted to add that I think we really want I think an ideal process, we would involve stakeholders and say, what have we learned? What are our next challenges? You know, and how is all of this best used and designed and crafted? So I just don't want this to inadvertently be a negative message about what's going on. I did have one more question about the overpayment issue, just in terms of next steps.
Commissioner Gill, before you get onto that, I want to just underscore what you said. I think that the renewable energy standard has been, you know, a shining success. I mean, the cost of renewables have gone down, you know, 90% in the last 10 years. I mean, it's an unbelievable success. But then, you know, once you have that success, sort of, you know, the statute is put in place to address the sort of the realities of what was there 10 years ago, as opposed to what's there today. And I just wonder if, you know, yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more on the distributed system. I think that that's really the area where, you know, a lot of focus needs to be. But in this compliance report, we really don't get much information on the distribution system. I mean, we get how they, you know, moved RECs from one year to the next to comply with the language of the statute. So I think your point's really well made. It's I think it's one of the great success stories in Colorado, and we're benefiting from it today. So.
And I will point out, I mean, we do have the DSP processes now, the distribution system planning processes, that if there is specific kind of information we're looking to gain about DERs, you know, I think this is all a conversation about where does that best come in and how is that best structured. And just really, I'd be excited to engage stakeholders to say, where are we now and what do we support and how should we structure this? Because it's exciting to be in a phase where we've seen some real successes here and can evaluate where we're going next.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I just echo everything you both said, and also agree it's a huge success story, which I was a small piece of in my prior life. Commissioner Gilman, did you have another comment on the $12 million?
Yeah, sorry to beat this one, but Ms. Chula, I'm just not exactly clear. So it seems like the company is planning on submitting some, I don't know what to call it. It's a waiver, it's an application, it's something to modify their own plans. I think we heard some interest here and probably want to look at other options too, or we're not certain. So I guess, when do we think that filing is coming? It's my first question.
That is a great question. I will maybe ask Ms. Crandall to jump in after I answer if I missed something. But what we know is that the company is going to issue this proposal as part of the 21A filing after the 2023 SRC request for proposals has concluded. And so my guess, based on previous timelines, is this would be in the coming months, not too far out, but I am not exactly sure. Yeah.
I
Ms.
think
Crandall?
that's, yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. I think that's probably correct. We don't have an exact timeline.
Okay. Well, perhaps we can talk internally a little bit about what this process looks like and where we go from there, and if we're truly waiting for their lead on that filing, or if there's some other way to look at this. I just when there's no deadlines, I get a little antsy because I never understand when something's gonna happen. So I like to know when it's gonna happen, especially because I'm hearing 3 concerned voices that we want an evaluation and we want to see this and understand the options. And so just having no understanding of exactly when it comes in is a little problematic, but perhaps we can discuss more internally. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess we can just wrap this up with an ABC decision finding that Public Service Company is in compliance. And I thank my 2 colleagues for the discussion, and we'll ask advisors and counsel to somehow bring this back, you know, maybe in the next 60 days for, you know, certainly before Thanksgiving, just to see where we're at and if we want to do anything else. So with that, Ms. Julia, anything else?
Yeah, thank you. Just wrapping up that we will take all this discussion under consideration. Thank you, the three of you, for the conversation, and appreciate that you've approved the compliance, and we will issue an order. Thank you.
Thank you. Proceeding number 22AL-0483E. Mr. Davis, Black Hills Electric, TCA.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff, and I'm joined by Ruth Harper, our Commission counsel, this morning. Last November, Black Hills Colorado Electric filed an advice letter to adjust its transmission cost adjustment effective January 1st, 2023. For Black Hills, the TCA recovers transmission-related costs that are incremental to the transmission investments already being recovered in the company's base rates. Because Black Hills has not had an electric base rate case in a number of years, the 2023 TCA filing represented the incremental transmission-related costs for the period between January 1st of 2016 through December 31st of 2022. The proposed 2023 TCA was designed to collect about $12.3 million on an annual basis. The currently in effect TCA, based on revenue requirements in the 2022 TCA filing, is designed to collect approximately $10 million on an annual basis. Staff of the Commission filed a protest to the advice letter filed last November, arguing that certain projects whose costs would be recovered through the 2023 TCA are not construction or expansion of transmission facilities, but are instead capital projects associated with ongoing maintenance of the transmission system. Staff argued that the plain language of 40-5-1014A allows TCA cost recovery only for the construction or expansion of transmission facilities for which a CPCN has been granted or the Commission has determined no CPCN is necessary. The Commission thus set the matter for hearing and suspended the effective date of the 2023 TCA. And because the 2023 TCA was suspended, the 2022 TCA remains in effect today. The matter was referred to ALJ Aviv Segev. He conducted an evidentiary hearing on May 18th. Black Hills and staff are the only two parties to this case. The ALJ issued a recommended decision on July 18th, and by and large, he approved Black Hills' request for TCA cost recovery, and his decision essentially leaves untouched the company's 2023 TCA. At its August 2nd weekly meeting, the commissioners stayed the recommended decision out of an abundance of caution to prevent the order from becoming the final decision of the commission. However, staff timely filed exceptions to that decision on August 7th, and Black Hills filed a response to staff's exceptions on August 14th. And that brings us to today, where the commission will decide whether to lift the stay on the recommended decision and otherwise address staff's exceptions. At a high level, staff clarifies in its exceptions that it's not seeking to reverse the ALJ's decision with regard to the cost of some 4 transmission projects that, in its case, staff had argued should be deemed ineligible for TCA cost recovery. Instead, staff states that it's presenting the same position in its exceptions to the recommended decision in this Black Hills matter as it presented in Public Service's electric rate case in proceeding number 22AL-530E. So in other words, staff would like the commission to set aside the recommended decision and enter a new final decision on the question whether Black Hills TCA should be narrowed in terms of what costs are eligible for recovery for effect prospectively, beginning with the 2024 TCA to be filed this November. To help the commission modify the TCA prospectively, staff puts forward a 3-pronged framework for determining TCA eligibility that addresses project authorization, whether the project entails the expansion of the transmission system, and prudency. In its response to those exceptions, Black Hills supports the commission's adoption of the recommended decision, and in particular, the findings that the amount sought to be recovered in the 2023 TCA are just and reasonable. Black Hills concludes that at the end of this proceeding, the commission should allow the company to recover the total annual revenue requirement of the 2023 TCA during the remaining months of this year. For today's discussion, what we'd like to do is start with a presentation from Ms. Harper on the legal dimensions of staff's case that remain at the heart of staff's exceptions. And then after that presentation, the commission would turn to 2 questions that I'd help you go through. And those questions are whether the commission agrees with staff and disagrees with the ALJ that there should be limits on the transmission projects whose costs Black Hills may recover through the TCA, and whether Black Hills should be authorized to collect all, a portion of, or none of the increase in revenues sought through the 2023 TCA over the remaining months of this year. So unless there are questions for me, I'll turn the discussion over to Ms. Harper.
Ms. Harper, you're up.
Good morning, commissioners. In its exceptions, staff recommends the commission find the meaning of construction and expansion of transmission facilities as used in section 45-101 is limited to new construction or expansion of transmission facilities and does not include routine replacement and repair of transmission facilities. Black Hills opposes this request and urges the commission to uphold the ALJ's findings. In the recommended decision, the ALJ finds no reason to reverse course with respect to the type of investments for which TCA recovery is permitted pursuant to 45-101. He concludes, had the legislature intended for TCA recovery to apply only to new construction, then the statute would have stated so much. He then goes on to say the use of certain terms in the legislative declaration, including robust transmission, reliability, and continually evaluate the adequacy of electric transmission facilities, tends to show the legislature contemplated routine repair and replacement of transmission facilities would be recoverable. Unless you have any questions, I can provide a recommendation on this question of statutory interpretation.
I'd welcome the recommendation. So please go, Ms. Harper.
I recommend setting aside the ALJ statutory analysis and making new findings that 45-101-4 sets the floor for what a utility must be allowed to recover under law, and that the plain language in the statute stating a utility is entitled to recover the costs in planning, developing, and completing the construction or expansion of transmission facilities excludes repair and replacement type of projects. The staff has advocated persuasively in this proceeding. The ALJ's analysis in the recommended decision cannot be relied upon because of both the analysis and the outcome. As to the analysis, the ALJ seems to take a hybrid approach, relying on both the plain language and the legislative declaration. However, a legislative declaration is only used as an aid in construing an ambiguous statute, and the ALJ never finds the statute ambiguous. And as to outcome, even if it were proper to bring in the legislative declaration, the ALJ's reading is problematic. As a whole, the declaration speaks to utilities improving their transmission facilities to meet the state's existing and future energy needs. So even if this source were relevant, the words cited by the ALJ are not grounds to deviate from the ordinary and commonly accepted meaning of the terms in fact used in the statute. I recommend the commission make its own findings and conclusions on this issue that would entail, first, by limiting recoverable costs to those related to planning, developing, and completing, the legislature indicated it intended this to cover projects that necessarily require planning and development. This is in contrast to, as trial staff would put it, the ordinary churn of replacement of equipment that has failed to reach the end of its useful life. As further support, dictionary definitions support this interpretation, referring to building something of component parts or increasing the volume of something. common usage of these terms also supports this interpretation. The accepted and understood meaning of to construct or expand is to create something new or increase the size, not to restore something to its original condition. And while it does not play a role in interpreting an unambiguous statute, the legislative context in which this provision was adopted does reinforce this interpretation. As staff argued in its exceptions, at the time SB 07-100 was passed, the legislature was focused on identifying the best areas of the state for resource development and developing plans to expand transmission facilities into those areas. In sum, I would recommend setting aside the ALJ's findings and making the findings and conclusions that I just described. If you agree with that, then Mr. Davis would take up the further policy questions.
Commissioner Plant,
I would agree with that recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree, Ms. Harper.
as do I, and I think it's consistent with how we interpreted the statute elsewhere. So thank you, Ms. Harper. Mr. Davis.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, in terms of policy, staff is asking the commission to establish a new framework to determine cost recovery eligibility under the TCA. Staff underscores that Black Hills TCA has increasingly been used as a mechanism to recover costs of routine repair and replacement of transmission facilities on an expedited basis outside of the review process of a rate case. As I mentioned earlier, staff's proposed framework entails authorization, expansion, and prudency. By authorization, staff means that a TCA eligible cost would be associated with projects for which the company has received a CPCN, or the commission has made a determination that the project does not require a CPCN. Staff goes on to state that projects completed in the ordinary course of business should not be eligible for recovery through the TCA. By expansion, staff means that the project should only be considered expansion if it allows for the injection of new generation capacity to the utilities grid. And according to staff, when replacement is the primary purpose of a project, the commission should not consider the project as expansion. And for prudency, staff recommends that the commission engage in ongoing monitoring to determine if projects are on time and within budget via performance indicators. Staff suggests that this process include a requirement that a utility complete 95% of its scheduled work and demonstrate that the annual ratio of the percentage of work completed to the percentage of actual spend to budget for each project equals or exceeds 95%. If a project does not satisfy those requirements, then the company could pursue cost recovery in a base rate proceeding, but would be unable to recover the costs through the TCA. In response to those exceptions, Black Hills argues that this three-pronged test is ill-conceived, unlawful, and unfounded. Black Hills takes issues with each of the three prongs, but also walks through the projects that were included in the 2023 TCA to illustrate how staff's application of this test would categorically deny recovery of 14 of the 17 projects, or in other words, deny recovery of $63.5 million of the $70 million of total investment being recovered. Also, in its response to the exceptions, Black Hills analyzed this staff statement that it is not contesting the ALJ's determination regarding TCA cost recovery of what are called the four projects. Black Hills calculates that those four projects, comprise 97% of the incremental transmission plant for which the company seeks TCA cost recovery in its 2023 TCA. And by the company's analysis, the company concludes that staff is now only disputing cost recovery of the remaining 3% of costs. Black Hills further disputes staff's contention that the TCA has drastically increased since its inception in 2009. Black Hills states that the $12.3 million revenue requirement for the 2023 TCA is only $10.7 million higher than the 2009 TCA revenue requirement. And that amounts to an increase of approximately $764,000 per year. Black Hills concludes that at the end of this proceeding, the commission should allow the company to recover the total unrecovered annual requirement for the 2023 TCA during the remaining months of this year. So before ruling on staff's exceptions, the commission should consider Black Hills TCA tariff. Sheet number 101 presents the calculation of the TCA rate, and that one rate applies to all customers. It's on sheet number 101 that Black Hills put new figures in to reflect the higher revenue requirements for the 2023 TCA collections. Sheet number 99 defines most of the components on sheet number 101, and one of those components is the term transmission costs. The return on transmission investment within the defined term transmission costs is calculated for, quote, the projected increase in the retail jurisdiction portion of the 13-month average net transmission plant for the 13 months immediately preceding the year in which the TCA will be in effect. So what that means is that the plant is the net transmission plant. It's a 13-month average, and it's backwards looking. It's for the year preceding the year in which the TCA will be in effect. The other words in the definition include ownership costs, and that means the incremental transmission investment that includes depreciation, accumulated deferred income taxes, and pre-funded allowances for funds used during construction. And then transmission costs also includes a return on the year-end transmission construction work in progress, or CWIP. And that balance cannot be the balance that's already being recovered through base rates. So again, in terms of policy, the commission has two decision points we suggest. The first, whether you agree with staff and disagree with ALJ that there should be limits on the transmission projects whose costs Black Hills may recover through the TCA, and that would be prospectively beginning in 2024 and thereafter. And then second, whether Black Hills should be authorized to collect all, a portion of, or none of the increase in revenue sought for the 2023 TCA over the remaining months of this year.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, so to the two decision points, I think that what we have done in the past is considered the statute, as Ms. Harper was saying, as being a sort of a floor. And upon that floor, established what were TCA qualified projects. And that was an express desire to include in the TCA those projects that expand transmission capacity. And rather than the broad reinterpretation of the statute that the staff is considering in this particular instance, is this the place where we could do something similar in this case, Mr. Davis?
I think I understand the question, and yes, I think staff recognizes this in its pleadings, that the commission could consider the statute a floor and modify the TCA tariff to narrow the types of projects that are TCA recoverable.
And so that would be to specifically your two decision points. That would be an agreement with staff in the first, and then we would deal with the 23 in the second.
Yes.
So that's where I am on the going forward for 24. But I would like to hear from my colleagues in terms of how we apply this for the purposes of 23.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, so for the 2024 going forward, I'd be inclined to make similar modifications, Mr. Davis, to what we made on public services in terms of defining TCA eligible projects as expanding. I think the exact terminology was like expanding capacity, specifically what this does is it excludes the routine replacement and repairs that staff's taken the most issue with. So I would be happy to see the 2024 tariff language changed as a result of this to have a similar change there. At this point, I'm not ready to jump on all of staff's suggestions about the multiple prongs and things to evaluate a project. I think that's a very reasonable change to make that is actionable. We can make now or order to be made now. We talked about doing a rulemaking on transmission in general and including the TCA, which I think would be a really ideal venue to explore some of these other potential prongs, and also the issue that we have two utilities, one of which does this retroactively and one which does it concurrent. I'd like to see these things shored up and made more consistent as we move forward, and I think rulemaking is the proper venue. So, I think for me, I'd prefer to go a little more surgical right now and order the TCA to make that one significant adjustment in terms of the TCA eligible projects, expanding capacity, thereby eliminating essentially routine replacement and repairs type work for that. So I don't know, you want me to pause there or go on to 2023, but that's what I'm thinking for 2024.
Yeah, why don't you go to 2023 and then we'll see where the differences are and try and resolve them, if any.
So I'd be inclined for the 2023 expenses to allow them to recover the remainder of those expenses in the final months of this year. In fairness, I think this had been interpreted by the commission differently, or at least executed differently, provided a more generous interpretation and execution of this in the past. And, to me, that was the understanding that they had when they undertook the 2023 projects, and I'm okay allowing those to continue run out through the end of 2023, but for 2024 I'd like to see the tariff language change so that the situation changes on a going forward basis.
I pretty much agree with that on this record, and for 2024 and beyond, I share staff's concerns and would limit the qualifying TCA cost recovery to those capital costs associated with transmission investment that results in a net increase in transmission capacity. On the second issue, I would allow Black Hills to collect the 2023 TCA revenues that it is seeking over the remaining months of this year. My only other comment is I'd be a little bit cautious about pushing this into rulemaking now. There may be reasons why we want to treat these two utilities separately. So I would just say, if we're going to do anything in this order, just resolve this in either a future rulemaking or company specific proceedings. So I just keep the flexibility, because I don't know that it makes sense to treat these two utilities the same until we better understand the cost structures and what's driving it, which I don't have. So that's my only minor going forward disagreement. Commissioner Plan, anything you'd like to comment on, and then I'll go back to you, Commissioner Goman.
No, I think that all makes sense. I think we all kind of landed in the same place on 24, and I'm happy to keep the same situation with 23 going forward for the reasons that Commissioner Gilman laid out. And I would say, that one of the things that I think I heard in Mr. Davis's explanation is that, they wouldn't be allowed recovery. They still get recovery. It's just a question of whether they get it through the TCA or they get it through a rate case. So I just want to clarify for anyone listening that they still get their money. It's just a question of when they get their money, and that's kind of what we're discussing here. But I agree with both of you.
Commissioner Goman, anything further?
Yeah, to the extent that we're already planning or thinking of doing a transmission rulemaking, I just want to, like, this is an appropriate issue to be explored in that rulemaking. I mean, the exact question of if a smaller utility or a bigger utility should be treated differently by rule is exactly one of the things you evaluate in the rulemaking. So saying we should look at this in the rulemaking doesn't necessarily say everybody's doing the same exact thing. It's like, what are the realistic reasons why the situation could be different or should look different as we go forward? So I don't think we have an imminent date set to initiate that effort, but I do still consider it the proper venue even to evaluate the question you brought up of if they're treated the same or differently.
I just don't want to foreclose making further changes in specific company-specific proceedings. So I don't
think
disagree
it
with
would do
you.
that. I think that's the ideal holistic venue to end up at. Proceedings in the interim are going to get dealt with in the interim, as they should.
Fair enough. Unless you have anything else, Mr. Davis, I think that can be an ABC decision on the exceptions. Does that give you what you need, sir?
I believe so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Proceeding number 23AL-0393E, Mr. Fuller, the medical exemption program. Looking good, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Adam Fuller with the Trial Staff Economics team. Today I'm presenting advice letter number 1928, which is Public Services filing to adjust its medical exemption program, or MEP rates, effective September 1st. The MEP provides a reduced energy charge for residential electric customers who have a qualifying medical condition and/or use essential medical equipment and whose household income is less than or equal to 400% of federal poverty guidelines. The advice letter proposes 4 changes to the MEP. First, the rate level will be reduced from approximately 7.6 cents per kWh to 6.4 cents per kWh, which is the off-peak energy rate for Schedule RETOU. Second, the MEP will be expanded from summer only to year-round. Third, all riders will be applied on a percentage basis to the base energy charge for MEP customers, rather than the current combination of percent-based and consumption-based riders. The fourth change modifies MEP tariff language to offer flexibility to customers and streamline participation by expanding timelines for customer self-attestation and the submission of documents to the company. After incorporating riders, the total energy rate MEP customers will pay is about 10.7 cents per kWh. The changes increase the discount MEP customers receive from an average of $9.50 per month for each of the 4 summer months to an average discount of $16 for each month of the year. The company estimates the modifications will increase MEP costs to roughly $300,000 per year from current costs of about $60,000 per year, and the impact to the average residential customer's monthly bill would be less than 0.01%. The commission received public comments from many customers over the past year expressing concerns about affordability, and Public Service states in its filing that it worked on this proposal with members from trial staff of the commission, Energy Outreach Colorado, the Colorado Energy Office, and the Chronic Care Collaborative, and that those organizations have authorized the company to state that they support the recommendations in this filing. So I'll pause here for any questions, or I can proceed to a recommendation.
If you can make a recommendation, that'd be great.
Certainly. So staff recommends the commission allow Public Services advice letter to take effect by operation of law.
Commissioner Plant.
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman.
Likewise, Mr. Fuller, I support it and happy to see some of these changes help to expand this program and its applicability, especially with current rate structures for the most vulnerable customers to help them address affordability. So appreciate some of the updates.
Yeah, I agree. During last winter, as you said, we heard from many customers that were struggling to meet rent, put food on the table, and pay for medical care in light of higher energy bills. So I greatly appreciate the company, staff, and the parties working through the medical exemption programs in a way that increased the discount and extended the time period in which it is available. And I just say, if appropriate, I'd like to see a press release from the PUC, because I think it's directly responsive to the public comments and affordability concerns that we heard last winter. So I don't know if that's in your department, Mr. Filler, but I just throw that out there. Any comments?
We can certainly look into that and get back to you.
Thank you. Let's see what we got next. Miss proceeding number 23I-0426 EG. Mr. Gomez, Mr. Foss, clean hydrogen.
Yes, good morning, commissioners. My understanding is that Mr. Foss is out today. So any other questions that you may have with regard to this proceeding, Mr. Levesque and Ms. Quintana will be available to answer any further questions. And this is in the matter of the investigation into the implementation of House Bill 23-1281 concerning measures to advance the use of clean hydrogen in the state and pursuant to Section 2, initiate an investigatory proceeding no later than September 1, 2023. As stated here, this is in response to House Bill 23-1281 concerning measures to advance the use of clean hydrogen in the state. Legislature passed this bill in the last legislative session for the purposes of achieving the state's greenhouse gas pollution reduction goals from 2030 to 2050, indicating that it'll require further technical innovation and economies of scale to bring costs down for deployment of innovative technologies, both for emission reduction of end uses and to generate energy through innovative methods such as clean hydrogen. The legislature went on to state the clean hydrogen may be an important resource to lower greenhouse gas emissions from sectors that are harder to decarbonize, such as heavy-duty transportation and heavy industry. And in order to support diversification of the state's energy production and create well-paid clean energy jobs, the General Assembly pointed out that Colorado had joined 3 other regional states in a partnership to pursue funding from the U.S. Department of Energy for a regional hydrogen hub. As going forward, the legislature also stated, as Colorado diversifies and decarbonizes its energy economy with clean energy sources, clean hydrogen may play an important role in the resilience of the state's electric grid and for dispatchable electricity generation that complements the use of wind and solar resources, while also helping achieve Governor Polis's goal of 100% renewable electricity generation in the state by 2040. And the inclusion of clean hydrogen as an element of decarbonization pathways should include comprehensive assessments of clean hydrogen in comparison to alternatives, including consideration of life cycle emissions, costs, impacts on communities, including disproportionately impacted communities, and environmental impacts on water, air, land, and biodiversity. So as a result, the General Assembly passed HB 23-1281 to provide for various methods to advance the use of clean hydrogen in the state, allow for agencies of the state and users of clean hydrogen in the state to coordinate with each other to take advantage of available federal funding and tax credits, and ensure that the use of clean hydrogen in the state is in alignment with the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction and environmental justice goals. In accordance with Colorado's 2019 goals for greenhouse gas pollution reduction, Colorado passed this bill to promote further technical innovation and cost reduction for clean hydrogen development in the state, while also understanding the cumulative impacts that may be incurred by a clean hydrogen project. As you know, as noted, HB 23-1281 refers to the Federal Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which recognizes the potential role for clean hydrogen to play in greenhouse gas reduction by establishing a range of tax incentives for clean hydrogen projects. In addition, the definition in 1281 comes directly from the IRA as hydrogen that is produced through a process that results in life cycle greenhouse gas emission rates that are within the life cycle greenhouse gas emission rates ranges. The bill also defines clean hydrogen project as one that results in the production of clean hydrogen by an investor-owned utility, which may include pipelines, electrolyzers, environmental controls, monitoring equipment, dedicated renewable energy sources for electrolysis, the purchase of clean hydrogen from third parties, and an upgrade to a turbine at an electric generating station if that upgrade is part of a state or federal application for a regional clean hydrogen hub. The bill also defines cumulative impacts as the incremental effects of a clean hydrogen project on the environment, including effects on air quality, water resource availability, climate, and public health that a clean hydrogen project has when added to the impacts from other developments, either in the past, present, or in the foreseeable future. In any of the relevant areas, including an airshed or watershed, as determined by rule by the commission or on a disproportionately impacted community. So specific to today, Section 2 outlines definitions contained in the bill and specifically requires the commission to initiate an investigatory proceeding no later than September 1st, 2023, to consider elements of clean hydrogen and clean hydrogen project development in three general areas. Those general areas include technical, health, and economic impacts. The required elements of the investigation under those are numerous. I won't go through them all right now, but they will be part of the proceedings going forward here. Also, staff has proposed as part of this proceeding and most relevant to this iDocket that a team of consultants be gathered and hired to research those three topic areas as they relate directly to Colorado. And the goal is to complete the investigation by early April 2024 in order to appropriately inform the commissioners of the issues surrounding clean hydrogen prior to the required adoption of rules or an MDocket related to a hydrogen hub project, which is required to be established by December 1, 2024. The deliverables from the investigation will include the assembly of the already existing reports, production of reports from the consultants, public information meeting, and potentially documents developed internally at the PUC. With regard to this iDocket and opening of this iDocket, generally this proceeding must find and assemble information on the items that I previously mentioned related to health and environment, markets in the Colorado economy, utilities and their customers, and technical issues. The scope of the information includes the potential for clean hydrogen projects operated by investor-owned utilities to contribute to meeting greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, the impact of clean hydrogen projects on the emission of air pollutants other than greenhouse gases and human health, potential markets for clean hydrogen, the potential for clean hydrogen projects to create or sustain jobs, the potential impact of clean hydrogen projects on ratepayers, including bills, rates, tariffs, and options to avoid cross-subsidization and cost shifting, processes and data necessary for an IOU to conduct a cumulative impact analysis of a clean hydrogen project, and any process necessary to avoid adverse cumulative impacts on disproportionately impacted communities, if any. The commission is to collect any data or information necessary or available to evaluate a clean hydrogen project against alternative projects, including how to measure, track, and report life cycle greenhouse gas emission rates, cumulative impacts, and the cumulative impacts and individual impacts on jobs, local economic benefits, and water use by clean hydrogen projects under the commission's jurisdiction. This investigatory proceeding may also collect information on any other issues that the commission determines relevant to consider. Therefore, we're recommending that the commission open this investigatory proceeding in order to gather that information and data consistent with the provisions of 40-2-138, subparagraphs 2, subparagraphs A through P, and to possess the information and tools necessary to ultimately implement appropriate rules in preparation for applications for clean hydrogen projects filed by IOUs. The information gathered from this investigatory proceeding will hopefully inform the determination of the best practices and processes in order to move forward with the commission's statutory responsibilities in as efficient and expeditious a manner as possible. This investigatory proceeding will serve as a repository for information gathered by the commission necessary to develop those rules and best methods to consider the myriad issues that will encompass the process of implementing clean hydrogen in Colorado. I'll stop there and ask if that up to this point, if there are any questions or anything you want to discuss, or any questions of Mr. Levesque before we move forward with the final recommendation.
Why don't you make your recommendation and then we'll come back for questions, discussions, or a vote.
Okay, my recommendation is to adopt the order that you have received opening this investigatory proceeding, and as well as adopting that decision. The staff would also like for the commission to consider and approve the hiring of the consultants that have been considered for this proceeding. Those include Stratagen, RMI, and ABT that will conduct various pieces of the research required by the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez, and thank you to the team to putting this all together in a very accelerated time frame. I guess Commissioner Plant, way more to come, dockets, rulemakings. Have a full discussion of clean hydrogen in the coming days, but what do you think of this?
Yeah, I support the recommendation, and I just have one quick question, Mr. Gomez. I didn't, in your description of the various different issues to be addressed or investigated in the iDocket, I didn't hear, and I may have just missed any consideration of health and safety impacts or concerns. Was that included in there? I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yes, it was.
Great. Yeah, I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to go?
Thanks. I support the recommendation, and maybe just wanted to emphasize, I think the way we're structuring this will be an iDocket here, Mr. Gomez, right, with those consultants helping to assemble some of the information required, and then potentially an MDocket, not potentially, the plan is an MDocket in the relatively near future, which is where ideally we'd be looking to engage stakeholders. I know there are a lot of stakeholders very interested in this, so just wanted to give maybe as much insight and preview as we could about where we think is the right and most appropriate venue to kind of engage those stakeholders and accept their comments. And I think we're seeing that as the MDocket, which would be open subsequent to this rather than the iDocket. But I don't know if you have any clarifications there, Mr. Gomez. That matches.
Yes, you're absolutely correct, Commissioner Gilman. This iDocket is open for the purposes of receiving the deliverables, which will include any existing reports and the production of the reports from the consultants, possibly a public information meeting, and to receive any other documents that could be developed internally at the PUC. The miscellaneous proceeding that will be coming up in several months will be to allow for legal briefs and stakeholder comments on the threshold issues related to the implementation of HB 23-1281. So for the purposes of this investigatory docket, we won't be receiving comments here, but we'll reserve those for the docket.
Okay, excellent. I just wanted to make sure we aired that, as I know people are interested and will be engaged in this issue, and wanted to kind of appropriately indicate where we anticipate that involvement occurring in that docket. So other than that, I don't have any other questions, Mr. Gomez, and I would agree with your recommendation to open the docket as indicated.
As would I, and I appreciate the clarification, because when I first saw the materials, I was a little confused also. So I appreciate the clarification that there's going to be an M docket and a future rulemaking to fully air all the issues, and that this I docket is for purposes of complying with the statute and initiating the studies and a repository for the required studies. So with that, Mr. Gomez, I think we can have an ABC decision opening the investigatory docket consistent with statute. Does that give you what you need, sir?
That certainly does. Thank you very much.
And then proceeding number 23V-0396E, right back to you, Mr. Gomez.
Yes.
Black Hills variance request.
Thank you, commissioners. Yes, if it's okay with you, I'd like to take items 7 and 8 together.
That'd be great.
Okay. These two items regard petitions filed by Black Hills Colorado Electric and Black Hills Colorado Gas. They are requesting, both entities are requesting a variance from rules 3034A Roman 3 and 4034A Roman 3. Black Hill states that according to House Bill 21-1286, which requires owners of Colorado building, it does require owners of Colorado buildings that are 50,000 square feet or more to report their annual energy usage to the Colorado Energy Office. It also requires qualifying utilities such as Black Hills Electric and Black Hills Gas, among other things, to provide the building owners or their agent energy usage for the building. Black Hills represents that it's developed a web portal where building owners or the building owners' agents may make a request for energy for a covered building. Black Hills states that it designed the web portal to be compliant with HB 21-1286. Commission Rule 3034A Roman 3 and 4034A Roman 3 related to both gas and electric require owners to sign a non-disclosure agreement with the utility, requiring the property owner to take certain safeguards to protect the building data from any unauthorized use or disclosure, and to protect the data from unauthorized access, destruction, use, modification, or disclosure. And it also sets out several other requirements with regard to non-disclosure and keeping that information and data safe. Black Hills Electric and Gas use the same web portal to facilitate requests of both gas and electric energy usage for benchmarking purposes. So the company is requesting the commission approve it to allow it to accept non-disclosure agreements from building owners as well as their authorized agents. According to the company, granting such a variance will allow the company to have administrative efficiencies in lieu of having to create two separate web portals, one for gas customers and one for electric customers. Black Hills proposes to include on its website portal a checkbox confirmation that lists the requirements identified in Commission Rules 3034A3 and 4034A3. And so if there are no questions, I do have a recommendation.
No, please go to the recommendation.
My recommendation is to grant the two separate petitions for variance. I believe the company is correct that administrative efficiencies will result from allowing Black Hills Gas and Electric to utilize its web portal to provide the information required to building owners and their agents pursuant to rules 3034A Roman 3 and 4034A Roman 3.
Commissioner Plant.
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gumman.
I agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC order, Mr. Gomez.
Great, thank you.
Sir. Commissioner Plant, Commissioner Gilman, I guess before we adjourn, I just provide a heads up that we're going to start next week's weekly meeting at 9:15 a.m. to accommodate some scheduling issues. So with that, Commissioner Plant, any final thoughts before we adjourn?
Nope. Thank you.
Commissioner Gilman?
Nothing additional.
With that, we're adjourned. And again, 9:15 start next week. Thanks all.
Thanks.